We're drawing near to that time of season that all whitetail hunters dream about, the November rut. You know, there's been a few ideas promoted over the years about the rut by outdoor writers and others that I just find not true. Today we're going to debunk 4 rut myths. Yeah, the first rut myth that I want to talk about is the idea of breeding taking place in October. Now, I want to state right from the beginning, I'm not going to say that no breeding takes place in October. But I want to give you a little background here. For over 25 years, I had a captive herd of research whitetails. And for over 40 years, I've been able to hunt almost every single day in November in the whitetail woods. During that time, I have never seen any breeding activity in the wild during October. And in my captive herd, only one doe, in all the years that I had those deer, hundreds of different opportunities, I only had one doe ever get bred in October. There's ideas out there that, you know, the most dominant doe or the matriarch doe in an area comes into heat first in October, and she sets the stage for the rut. From then on, it's on, you know, and that's what triggers the rut. And there's all kinds of variations to different theories around breeding taking place in October. But I'm here to tell you, very, very, very little breeding takes place in October. Most of it takes place in November, and then there's a little each month following. But the bulk of that breeding takes place in November, very little in October. The next rut myth that I want to talk about involves the timing of the rut. You know, I've seen all kinds of different theories and ideas promoted about how the moon and the moon phase triggers does to come into heat and triggers the rut. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. It's all based, the rut timing is based 100% on photoperiodism. That is the amount of daylight hours. You know, a white-tailed doe has a pineal gland. The amount of daylight that's being sensed by that animal each day, as those days are shortening, it triggers those animals to come into heat. Now, through my research herd, I noted that some individual does on my farm would come into heat on almost exactly the same day every year. For example, if I had a doe that came into heat on November 14th, next year she was probably going to come into heat right around the November 14th, give or take one day. And I just seen it over and over and over, and it didn't matter what the moon phase was, it was so regular. Photoperiodism is what triggers the rut. It has absolutely nothing to do with the moon phase. It happens the same time every year. As further proof, my captive research herd, the does in that herd would have their fawns at the exact same time year after year after year, which tells me that the breeding took place at the same time year after year after year. Forget the idea that moon phase has any part in triggering the rut or the timing of the rut. So the next rut myth that I want to talk about is the idea that during the rut, you're going to have these new bucks moving into your area, and you're going to have a chance at these new bucks that were not there before. In all the years that I've been running trail cameras, I just don't see this happening. I think the bucks that you see during the rut were there all along. Now, a lot of times what happens is during the rut, those bucks become more active. Maybe the buck was there all along and you didn't know it. But I just don't see new bucks coming into an area. In fact, on my farm, I don't have a buck come by that I did not know existed. However, later in the year, after the rut, sometimes new bucks will come into the food sources and such. But during the rut itself, very, very seldom do I ever see a buck on any property I hunt that I didn't already know that buck was there. So the last rut myth that I want to talk about is one that has really irked me for a long time. I wrote articles about it more than 15 years ago, and that involves the idea that there is a second rut. I think the theory goes that we have the main rut, you know, in November, and then 30 days later, any of these does that did not get bred, as well as some doe fawns, will come into heat. And 30 days after the peak rut, there will be a secondary rut. And some folks have even taken it so far as to say that 30 days later in mid-January, there's a third rut. Well, there's one whitetail rut every fall, period. One rut. I think a lot of people just don't understand how that rut plays out. It's not a short-lived breeding season, but it's a long marathon breeding season. So what happens around November 8th, 9th, the does really start coming into heat. And for about a 2-week period, the majority of mature does get bred during that 2 weeks. There might be a handful that come into heat later, but most of them are going to come into heat during that 2-week period. It is very, very rare for a doe to come into heat and not get bred. Every buck in the woods essentially is capable of breeding, and that includes button bucks. And on top of that, a hot doe can be smelled by a buck, I believe, at least a mile away. So when a doe comes into heat, she is going to have the attention of a buck. It might be a little yearling, it might even be a button buck, but the odds are very, very good that she's going to get bred on that first heat cycle and not recycle 30 days later. So that takes us to the topic of doe fawns. Doe fawns do not come into heat on a calendar. They come into heat when they reach a certain body weight. Most doe fawns, in my opinion, get bred in January. That's when they have achieved enough body weight, they are physically mature enough that they come into their first heat cycle. But there's absolutely no way you can put a date on a calendar and say this is when them doe fawns are coming into heat. I've seen doe fawns get bred on my research farm anywhere from November through February. And I know of instances where I've seen wild fawns that I know that doe had to get bred in March. So those doe fawns coming into heat is very random based on that individual doe fawn reaching a certain body weight. The idea that there's a second rut is just a total myth. It's just the rut is prolonged, and there's no way you can set a schedule where every 30 days there is a minor or a miniature version of the peak rut that you've seen in mid-November. So as we conclude this video, I'm sure I've ruffled a few feathers, and I'm sure that there's a lot of you watching this that maybe agree with me on some of these points and disagree with me on some, and that's fine. But I want to really stress something as we close here. My opinions shown in this video are based on experience, my first-hand experience. For over 40 years, I've had the privilege of being able to hunt almost every single day in November, year after year after year. And you compare that to the average deer hunter, he may take 1 week off of work in November. Well, I'm getting to hunt 4 weeks in November, and I've been doing that for over 40 years. And then let's throw in the fact that for 25 years, I had a captive herd of research whitetails that I worked with closely. I got to see the breeding cycle of those animals. So if you want to disagree with me, that's fine. I don't expect everyone to agree with everything I say, but I just want to stress that the opinions I've expressed here in this video are from first-hand experience. It's not something I read in a magazine. It's not something I read on the internet. It's from first-hand experience. I hope this rut you're able to kill the biggest buck of your life.